Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is really my honor and a pleasure to have the chance to be here with you today and spend these 25 minutes that I have with you sharing Intel vision on education. This is my third Innovation Africa. And I've got an EMEA, so Europe, Middle East, and Africa responsibility from a few years ago, and I come often to the continent. Still, this event is something special. It's got something unique. It is the setting, it is the agenda, it is the leaders, it is how we interact, it is all those conversations. But I promise that when I go back, I come back energized, more energized than ever, and amazed about your plans, about your strategies, about the challenges, amazed about the progress that we do, that you do year on year. Education is a slow-moving area, right? Education is something that is like a big ship. It's difficult to steer from one side to the other. Right? We're talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of teachers. We're talking about millions of students, for sure. Still, and the Permanent Secretary said this morning, our lives are changing a lot. Our societies are changing, our countries are changing, and the reason for that is technology. So we cannot close our eyes. We cannot close our eyes to the reality, and we need to act accordingly within education, within the limits that what we have. I would like to take a step back and try to look a bit in perspective before getting into the specifics. And when I do that, I always try to make myself the question, what is what we are trying to solve? And for me, the right question, and that is what it's written there, is what is what it's keeping our leaders awake? What is keeping all of you awake at night? And we are not short of challenges. We've mentioned a few in the past few minutes, but we have lots of challenges, right? We can start wherever you want. Agriculture, food security. We can talk about infrastructures, transportation, water, electricity, ICT. We can talk about rural development, urban development. We can talk about security and crime or social equality. We can talk about the sustainability of all the activities that we do. Of course, we can talk about high quality education. All of those problems are different in nature. All of them need a multifaceted, multi-year approach in order to be successful. But in my latest trip to South Africa, only a few weeks ago, I got hold of this magazine that you have there, and I was reading of another of the leaders of the continent, the CEO of the Africa Development Bank, and he was saying, what keeps me awake at night is how we can work with our programs in the Africa Development Bank to alleviate the issues of youth and employment. So that was sparkling on me a bit of the topic of this presentation. So you think employment, and you think employment for what? I think we need to look back and say, okay, so what the students that we have today are going to face tomorrow? I think that's an important one, right? And I won't say again, because it's been in past years well covered, and today already mentioned several times, we are living the fourth industrial revolution. Again, I'll save you the time to talk more about that, but those billions, literally billions, we think about 50 billion devices that will come up with us in the next few years, are going to transform everything, every sector of activity, every industry, and we won't avoid it. It will happen, right? And it will become a driver for innovation, and a driver for change, and a driver for growth, and hopefully an opportunity for country differentiation and development, right? And when these huge eruptions happen, and we've seen it through history, all the countries go back to the reset. They all go back to the beginning. And it's a great opportunity for many of us to step forward.
By the year 2020, this little blue planet will be home to more than 50 billion connected devices. And while it's impossible to predict all the ways our everyday lives will be impacted, there is one thing we know for sure. The speed of life will not be slowing down. Imagine the amazing new experiences that will be made possible as the promise of a truly smart and connected world is fully realized. Through the rapidly expanding variety of personal computing devices, the Internet of Things, and the powerful intelligence of the cloud. This is the future of computing, and it's approaching at the speed of life.
So if you try to look be a bit beyond what is going to happen below, some of his inspirational images, some of which are closer, some of which are a bit farther, our labor market is going to change. And it's going to change significantly. It's not going to be like today or like yesterday, right? Some of the jobs that will be needed, we will need more. And some of the jobs that we've been having today and training our people or students today, we will need less. And I'm not sure I'm sure you're not surprised by seeing engineering, architecture, computation into the highest part of it. And on the other hand, the administrative work, process-related, manufacturing, it's going to go lower as we get more and more automated. That is what is going to happen. And this is not specific to this country or this continent, it's across the world. This is the reality, and you have there two statistics from two different good researchers. And they both say about 50% of the jobs that we have today have the risk to be computerized or automated. About half of the wages that we pay today people to do their jobs can tomorrow taken over by somebody else. Right? So, sorry, I was mentioning this one, right? So this is what is happening. Now, look as well from a different angle. This is a complementary view of it, because probably all of us here, we got trained to find a job in a different entity, public, private, larger, smaller size, but we were trained to find a job. And most probably, our future pupils will have to create, find, or develop opportunities. So that is important. The way we embed innovation and the way we create innovation-ready kids is going to completely change the future of education as well. So actually, just consider how education, entrepreneurship, and employment, they all come together. It is three things completely tightly united, right? And when we are able to develop a successful strategy across them, then some of the answers to the questions, to the challenges that we were making at the beginning will happen. We'll get into more competitive countries, we'll get into better competencies, we'll get into economic boost, we'll get into more equal opportunities for all. But what is it a successful strategy? If you ask me, in my humble point of view, a successful education strategy is one that develops the skills 4.0 into our kids. Right? We talk about the fourth industrial revolution, reality 4.0, skills 4.0. Right? And we need to help develop them. Which are those skills? Well, we've been talking about those skills in one way or other. Digital literacy, of course, but much more than that. Virtual collaborations, this is our day-to-day. What about design mindset? That is super important, consider it with the innovation piece. What about learning, continuous learning? We need to keep educating ourselves because everything keeps changing. In the future, the kids will have to keep retraining all the time. Teachers need to do it. So that's also a skill. And of course, I think computing, mind thinking, computational thinking, that's also super important. So there are different ways of embedding those skills into education. But we believe that these three things here are very successful. It is coding and programming, it is robotics, it's physical computing. When we do that, we success into the skills development. Now, and then what we do? Well, or what we need to do is put the student at the center of it, and then work around with the traditional activities that, of course, will always be there, and the new activities as well. That is how we succeed, and I'll talk a bit more about that. Now, let me take a step back again and talk about Intel for a second, because some of you will have been exposed to Intel before, but some others won't. We have a long experience in education. We have more than 2 decades working with different governments across the world, over 100 governments. We've been training teachers, working with over 50 million teachers in these 2 decades, and we've been reaching out to over 100 million students. I think our approach is interesting from the fact that we believe that we need to put ICT into the context of education transformation. ICT is not the end state, or at least not in general, or for every student. ICT is a means to get something else, to get into those new skills, right? So I think that's pretty differential in our strategy, but we understand we're only one more piece of this complex puzzle that we have with other technology companies, with NGOs, with funding entities, with many government entities. So we believe that's also important, right? And what we do is we engage, we collaborate, we develop, we learn, and we share. And about sharing, I wanted to bring this case to you. Right? This is a case of a country that we are collaborating with them right now. It's a country that has been very successfully implementing some programs in the past, especially for higher education, for students and for teachers. And it's a country that is fully committed to keep evolving education. And this is Senegal. And I'm 100% sure all of you believe in what I said, that reality is changing and that we need to do something, and the skills we'll buy it. But what is our reality? Our reality is that when we go back to our countries, we have this patchwork. Our legacy in education is huge, and we won't change it, and we'll have our different levels, and we'll have lots of workers, teachers and not teachers, and we'll have different technologies and different programs. And we have hugely different, diverse infrastructure, rural, urban, richer, poorer, etc. So it is important that we move from a patchwork approach into a more of a plan, orchestrated plan approach. And that is what we have been doing with the government in Senegal. And things we've learned over this time, and things that I wanted to share with you that don't work, are things like this. ICT or this transformation is not about ICT, right? We cannot position this as a technology project, or we will fail, right? Or we won't try to limit it to the specific classroom, because learning is a continuous. It cannot be driven by one organization, or we cannot wait until all the stars align, because we'll never do anything, right? Or we shouldn't position it as a pilot. These things don't work. What works? When you have that leadership that we were mentioning today, the permanent secretary was mentioning today several times, the leadership that we are hearing this morning, and we get a clear plan with deliverables, with milestones, etc. That's very important. It's important to get the quick wins. And actually, let's try the difficult ones, not the easy ones, so that then it's easier to go and move forward. Teachers, content, critical, and public-private partnerships, those are also helping us win in many cases. Alex and Joao, whom you may know, who are my colleagues here sitting with me today, always start when engaging in collaborators with this slide. And this is about starting with a solid plan. Again, let's put the student at the middle. What do we want to achieve? And then surround it with leadership, surround it with policy, and then put the pieces. The pieces we know: professional development, content, infrastructure, funding, sustainability, data. Use the data. We've been talking several times about data. Let's bring it. I'm now finishing my presentation, and I wanted to leave with 3 examples of different deployments or cases in which we are working with different entities. And maybe this helps us sparkle some conversation either now or later on in one-on-one conversations. This one is the follow-up of the conversations that we're having with Senegal. For them, they want to go first into the teachers. They want to put in place the infrastructure that the teachers need from a resources point of view, from a content connectivity point of view, and reach out to those ministry civil servants that support the transformation. That is how they will want to start in their program. Then they will go into the schools and the pupils and the students. So how we will do that? We will do with this School Hubs 4.0 that I will describe in a minute. And only in the third phase, we go massively into the kids for 2 reasons. First, because we believe that we can only be successful in these massive deployments when the rest is in place. And second, because it is very consuming, right? And we need to make sure that the budget is there, and we need to make sure that the sustainability of the program is there before jumping into it. This was one example, what we're working with Senegal. This is a different example. This is for higher education. And we've been talking just a bit here and there into higher education. But if you think of it, if you want to accelerate the market of your students with skills 4.0 into your companies and make your companies and your industry fabric more competitive and your country more competitive, let's work into higher education. Now, in this environment, the situation changes, right? The students require much more connectivity. They require much more computing power. Actually, you may want to go along the path of high-performance computing and develop research on different knowledge areas. That is something we are working right now with a couple of universities in South Africa. Right? This is a model that when you think of those technical studies and bringing it back to the jobs that will be more required, more successful in the future, this is exactly where you may start. And finally, we wanted to take this example of the school hubs 4.0. What are they? Well, they are flexible classrooms. They are flexible classrooms in which you have the infrastructure that you need to bring your students and do all the digital content for your subject where you have it. Because this is how you may be able to blend the traditional activities and learning with the new activities and learning, the digital piece. Now, you may want to go there and have specific areas around coding and programming that, as we have heard this morning from our Microsoft colleagues, is one of the most required skill for the future. So we may want to use these classrooms for those too. But it's not only that. What about drones? What about something else? Yeah, that is where we would do this. And beyond, well, you can use these classes, these classrooms, these innovation hubs, these school hubs, as well as an incubators for new opportunities. Remember the innovation piece into it. I mean, innovation is something that starts soon, and the kids need to have that embedded, and it's so easy. We sometimes talk about technology, and it's so difficult. We talk about artificial intelligence, and it's so difficult. I finished my university 25 years ago, and I already did something about neural networks at the time. It hasn't. We have it. It's easy. Now, can we bring it to the students today? We have these kits, cheap kits. And with these kits, artificial intelligence kits, we can start recognizing faces easily in very little time. So if you want something flashy, something new, something refreshing, we have options too. With this, I really want to finish. Our reality is changing. The world is changing. Digital transformation is here, and we need to embrace it. And if we want to be successful with our kids, educating our kids for that reality, we better think of those skills 4.0. And education is our tool and what we can leave for those kids to be successful in the future. So we're super happy to have the chance to be here with you again. We will be looking forward to conversations about how to help you in your education plans for this future. Thank you for your time.
Well, Norberto, before you go, any questions for Norberto? Do we have any arms? Sorry, maybe my eyesight's going a little bit.
There's one there at the back.
Okay, let's see.
And here too.
Okay, there you go. Sorry, Dr. Elizabeth. I think it's the bright lights.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. But as you know, your presentation links to the previous speaker's presentation, which talks of education for all and quality. We are talking of quality education. There's something missing. I would like you to educate me. Where do you now fit the physical challenge? Because we are talking of inclusive education following the policy of the UN on the sustainability and also the Millennium Development Goals. How can you come in and bridge the gap now to make sure that the physically challenged, also have access to, the quality education, equity, and all that, because we're talking of employability, innovation. How do we cut across? How do we factor their needs in what you are going to do? Thank you, because it's very important.
Thank you. I didn't mention among the challenges, but this is definitely a challenge. But it's also something where technology can help, right? And what was it this morning when we were hearing about the case of London, right? Where teachers can be shared or best known methods can be shared. I think technology can help into helping teachers reach where there are no teachers, or virtual environments, on remote environments. We've seen a lot, we're facing a lot of this in higher education too. We don't have enough universities. We've been talking access, primary education, but in higher education is not different, right? How can universities serve those students that we need with higher qualification? So I think technology is part of the answer. It's definitely not the answer. Where we don't have connectivity, where we don't have physical security, then we will be. But can, through virtual environments, help through sharing teachers, share through, yes, I believe so. It's only another stone into the solution. I'm not sure this will be the solution per se.
Okay. Do we have one more question for Norberto? Over here.
Thank you very much.
Oh, we'll do two then. We'll do this gentleman, and then next one with the arm over here.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Dr. Elisha Chamnoro Wagujeke. I'm a research officer in the Ministry of Education, Zimbabwe. There's been too much emphasis on formal educational systems, or the mainstream. And we are not putting any effort to non-formal education learners in terms of their vulnerability. They are marginalized, we have dropouts, they affect our transition rates. The technology that has been talked about is for formal, mainstreamed educational systems. What do you have in place for non-formal education programs? Because these actually cover at least 60 to 75% of our population, those who have not been catered by the formal system of education, which is very simple to run. Thank you.
Yeah, that's another great question. If I had the answer, yeah, I would be glad to share it with you, right? What we have seen, you really need to segment, right? Because that non-formal education can be everything. And you have many different communities and many different people and many different ages and different approaches that you can use. Vocational learning, it's something that can really be improved through technology, right? So that is an area that we can do more, and there are different contents. Another one is accessibility with people with different disabilities, right? For example, that has been improving significantly too, thanks to blind people, right? For example, thanks to technology, but it's difficult to generalize. So what I would like to have is the conversation with you. It's, can we segment? Can we find those groups of people where we can have an impact? And let's try to solve one by one.
Thank you very much.
We'll take one more from the man in the striped hat. Sorry. And then we'll move on. You'll have every opportunity because you'll be able to meet with Norberto later.
Can if the mic, when his mic is going, that can quickly squeeze in a question because I have a mic.
Oh, you nicked the mic. Okay.
you can see
Guy.
from there.
Well, okay. Good move.
Thank you very much, Norberto. I'm aware of the work that you are doing with us in Southern Africa regarding the SADC cyber infrastructure. I think it's very, very important. Now, two things I really want to mention. Most countries are talking about a knowledge-based economy and moving towards it. But very few have a detailed roadmap, a resourced roadmap of how to get there. And I think this is very critical. And the issue of data, you've mentioned this in passing, others have mentioned in passing, is very critical. Where is the data and how can you access it? Countries like Botswana are trying very hard through the African Open Science Platform to start the conversations about data. How can we start opening up our data sets to facilitate all this you are talking about? These are very critical points because there are issues of history, there are issues of openness, there are issues of infrastructure, there are issues of capacity building. Just making sure that ministries, for example, can share the data they have, or making sure that innovators can access the data that governments have in terms of agriculture, in terms of health. These are systemic problems that need to be addressed before we even talk about an Industry 4.0 or a knowledge-based economy. The second part is, I'm a computer scientist. I think primary education does not have a proper curricula for computational thinking. We are talking about ICT, we are talking about computer awareness. We are not even training our teachers to train students around computational thinking. I don't blame them. I think partly industry has to partner with us to make sure that they take their responsibility in preparing students for the workplace. I'm saying this because at the University of Botswana, we are trying to create a co-creation platform. We are a very small country, we have a very small industry. Most of the companies are big companies like yourselves. So we're really inviting you to come to the table to make sure that when we are training students from first year to final year, I teach 200 undergrads, but I teach 4 master students. But when they are coming through the pipeline, can we work closely to make sure that we imbibe the necessary skills that are relevant to in industry? The second part is there's a legacy in African education. Some say it's a missionary legacy, missionary education. We learn, we teach students to make sure that they learn by route, by memorizing, when the Eastern countries actually emphasized problem solving. For me, I think those are 2 issues. The issue of data, the issue of the relevant curricula that reflects the reality of the future skills. Now, people are talking about AI and robotics. People are worried about their jobs in the future. I say this, we need to teach students to be not machines, to learn about creativity, to learn about problem solving, and to learn about working in teams. We don't have to teach them things that machines can do better.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thanks for that point. Let's ask Norberto, the chap with the striped hat. Come on, you had your arm up, and let's ask that. This is the last question. If you could make it a question, a punchy question, and I'm sure Norberto would be delighted to answer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I'm Augustine Sheku, the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Information and Communications from Sierra Leone. I want to thank you and the presenter for enlightening us. And I am more concerned about the quick wins, which you have not elaborated upon very cogently. The reason why I'm talking about quick wins is because in your submission, you said we should place the students at the center of our policies and programs. But in all of this, you need stakeholders, be it at government level, be it at the private sector, and even parents. But at the moment, we have a generational gap, wherein the baby boomers, before now, were basically exposed to just rudimentary systems. Whereas in the millennials, you have this technology that has boomed. But it is the baby boomers who probably have the resources to be able to drive the technology that can benefit the millennials who now see it as a way of life. But in the event you don't have convincing strategies where people look at technology with some misgivings, especially the disadvantages that it has brought about, taking into account all that is happening as a result of technology, you find out that it will be very difficult for you to arouse their enthusiasm to give it the type of primacy that it deserves. So what strategy do you adopt, be it quick wins or short-term, long-term, to ensure that it is all embracing and that these people who are the first-timers but are not really exposed to the new technology can adapt it and also be able to promote it? Thank you.
Okay, trying to be super quick, I think. Yeah, as I mentioned, education is a big ship, and it's difficult to steer one side or another in the short term. I think it was mentioned as well this morning, consistency, policy consistency. So we cannot have one government taking over and changing the plan. That won't work. We need consistency in our actions. About the quick wins are, for each country, are going to be different. Some countries may want to go into some rural areas, and I think the example of Mozambique might be a good one. Some countries might go into these school hubs with artificial intelligence, something flashy, easy, potentially achievable in the short term. Some countries will want to go into a longer term route. I think you need to define the priorities and your action topics in the long term, that is the roadmap, and we'll be happy to work with you, defining those and with the rest of the industry about how to put it to practice.